In a simple configuration, we would just have a single domain for our entire infrastructure. But in some organizations, in some environments, it's necessary to have more than one domain and even more than one forest. So in large organizations, it's necessary to build an Active Directory structure that may be composed of several domains. They may even have multiple trees and possibly even a few forests, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So most small or medium businesses will have a single domain because, number one, it's very simple, it's easy to manage, it doesn't cost very much to have just a single domain because you only need a couple domain controllers, and it's easier to access resources. So if you only have a single site or maybe just a few very small sites or something like that, or maybe one business unit or something along those lines, then it makes sense to have a single domain. But you may need to have a multi-domain environment if you have different account policies in different organizational units or in different parts of the company or organization. If you have different name identities, for example, different parts of the company might use different trade names, for example, and they may require their own domain names. To control replication, for internal versus external domains, so maybe different parts of the company, again, that might need different domains, or for tight security. You can have more granular control with these additional domains. So you can add a subdomain. This is one way to create additional domains. You can have subdomains. A subdomain maintains a common naming structure with the forest root. So the third level domain name is different. So for example, if the forest root domain is csmtech.local, then a subdomain might be us.csmtech.local. And then there may be others like ca.csmtech.local, for example. Or you can have business units. So for example, publishing.csmtech.local and sales.csmtech.local and so forth and so on. So subdomains is one way to do this. When you're creating a subdomain, you can consider the following. What server is going to be the first domain controller, or DC, sorry about the spelling error there, for the new domain? What are the names of the subdomain in the new domain controller? What Active Directory related roles will the new domain fill? And which site will the new domain controller be located? And are you going to install a second domain controller for the subdomain immediately? And you would want to have a second domain controller for fault tolerance, for example. Who's going to administer this new domain, for example? Another question you need to figure out. Is it going to be different than, say, the other domain than from the forest, or is there going to need to be local control? So when you're adding a tree to an existing forest, when two companies merge, for example, you may need to add a tree to an existing forest. Or if a large company splits into separate business units, as companies grow, sometimes they kind of split off different business units. Even small companies sometimes do that. So adding a tree to an existing Active Directory forest isn't very much different from adding a subdomain to an existing tree. You just need a name for the new tree that includes the top level and second level domain names. So to configure, when you use domains, you also have to worry about the UPN suffix. The UPN suffix is basically the second part of a username after the @ sign. So jsmith@csmtech.local, csmtech.local would be the UPN suffix. So each time you create a new domain, whether it's a subdomain or a new domain or a new tree within a forest, you have to determine what that UPN suffix is going to be. And it can be the same for all users on the network. It doesn't necessarily have to be different, but it's something that you'll have to determine. So in your text, there's some instructions that you can follow for creating alternative UPN suffixes. In some cases, you may need to have a multi-forest environment. This is where you have not only more than one domain, but you have multiple forests that have a trust relationship, which we're going to be talking about here in just a few minutes. So all domains within the forest will share a single schema, a forest-wide administrative account, operations masters like FSMOs, your global catalog, and trust between domains, as well as replication between domains. So all of these things are the same within any domain within a forest. So why would you add an additional forest? Well, if any of these things needs to be different for one of your domains, then it would have to be a new forest within, a new forest rather than being another domain within an existing forest. So you might need this if you have schema changes, in other words, different schemas between different domains, which could happen, maybe different types of information you have to store between different domains. There could be for security, or because there's a corporate merger, for example. Two completely different companies that have merged will have two completely different forests, but then you can establish trust between those two forests after a merger so that employees in one part of the organization can now access resources in the other part of the organization. So it allows this type of thing to happen. So it's certainly useful. All right, so in the next slide deck, I'm going to discuss Active Directory trusts.